Alright, the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board. Accounting for Federal Oil and Gas Resources. Statement of Federal Finance and Accounting Standards 38. April 13th, 2010. The Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board Secretary of the Director of the Office of Management Budget for the Comptroller of the established Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board, or the Board, in October 1990. Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board is responsible for promulgating accounting standards of the United States government. These standards recognized with the general accepted accounting principles for federal government. An accounting standard typically formulated with the initial proposal after considering the financial budgetary information needs of the citizen, including news media, state, local, legislature, analysts for private firms, academia, elsewhere, Congress, federal, executive, federal program manager, other users of federal financial information. Proposed standard publishing the exposure draft of the public comment, in some cases the disclosure of the memorandum invitation for comment or preliminary review of the documentation may be published before the exposure draft is published on the specific topic for the public hearing, sometimes held with the receive oral commentation with the written comments. Board considers comment and decides whether to adopt the proposed standard with or without the modification after the review of three officials who sponsor the Federal Accounting Standard Advisory Board. Of the board published and adopted the standards of the state. Federal Financial Accounting Standards of the Board allow for the similar process statement of federal financial accounting concepts, which guide with the Board of development of accounting standard with formulating the framework of federal accounting and reporting. Additional background information is available from Federal Accounting Standard Advisory Board or its website. Memorandum and understanding of the moment of the Government Accounting Office of the Department of Treasury with the Office of Management about the Federal Government Accounting Standards. The Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board, the mission statement of the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board, exposure draft statements of federal financial accounting standards concept, Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board newsletters, and other items of interest for the posting of the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board website, fasab.gov. Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board, 44-1 G Street, Northwest, Suite 6814, mail stop 6K, 17V, Washington, D.C. 20548, telephone number 202-512-7350. Fax 202-5112-7366 to fasab.gov. The work of the U.S. government is not subject to the copyright protection of the United States. It may be reproduced, distributed in entirety without further permission of the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board. However, because of the work may contain copyrighted images for the material portion from the copyright holder may be necessary if you wish to reproduce the material separately. Summary: the standard required for the value of the federal government's estimated petroleum royalty, the production of federal oil, gas, proved reserves to be reported in the schedule of the estimated federal oil, gas, petroleum royalties. Additionally, the standard requires value of the estimated petroleum royalty revenue designated for others with the reported schedule estimated federal oil, gas, petroleum royalty to be distributed to others. The schedule of the representative of the required supplementary information as part of the discussion all significant federal oil, gas resources under management of the entity. The statement is effective with the requirement supplementary information periods beginning with after September 30th, 2011, and earlier implementation encouraged. It is the board's intent for the information required with the state transition basic information of being reported with the requirement supplementary information for the period of 3 years prior to the conclusion of the 3-year. The requirement supplementary information period of the board plans to make the determination whether the information will transit basic for the information financial statement of recognition or note disclosure statement will remain in effect until such time a determination is made. Table of contents: summary, introduction, purpose, materially effective date, standard scope, definition, accounting, reporting, federal oil, gas resource with competent and component entities, schedule estimate, federal oil, gas, petroleum royalties, schedule estimate, federal oil, gas, petroleum royalties to be distributed to others, annual valuation, estimated petroleum royalties to be distributed to the others, component entity reporting requirements, consolidated financial report of the United States government, reporting requirements effective date, appendix A, base of conclusion, project history, accounting, other type of the natural resource, fiduciary oil, gas resources, overview of federal oil, gas resources, undiscovered resource reserves, figure 1, and the figures illustrate appendix A, basic for conclusions, appendix B, illustration, appendix C, abbreviations, appendix D, technical terms, appendix E, glossary. Alright, purpose statement of the Federal Financial Accounting Standard with the 6 of the accounting of the property, plant, with equipment 8 with the supplementary stewardship the reporting, and 29 heritage asset stewardship land. Established standards related to the federal lands, but specifically exclude the natural resource from the scope of those standards with extensive of the federal oil, gas resource with existing on the public lands throughout the country with the other continental shelves. Currently, federal financial reporting does not provide information about the quantity or value of these assets. The board believes that the federal oil, gas resources represent the federal asset for the accounting of the reporting information about the assets who would enhance accountability for the stewardship over assets of the federal government. 3. The statement provided with a more complete accounting with the oil gas resource available to the federal government, accounting with the federal government's royalty share with the approved reserves and asset with the reporting information with the asset required supplementary information would be provided with a transparent regard of the value and change of the value of these significant assets result of the information contributed to the meeting of the federal financial reporting objective of materiality. The provision of the statement need not to be applied to immaterial items of determining whether an item material depends on the degree with omitting or misstating information about what the item makes of the probable with the judgment of the reasonable person relying on the information would have then changed or influenced by the omission or misstatement. Effective date stands effective with required supplementary information periods beginning after September 30th, 2011 and earlier implementation is encouraged. 6. In the board intent with the information requirement of the statement of the statement transition basic information being relayed with the required supplementary information for the period of 3 years prior to the conclusion of the 3-year required supplementary information. The board plans to make the determination as to whether the information is transitioned to the basic information financial statement recognition note disclosure of the statement that will remain in effect until such determination is made. Alright, standard scope. The statement applied with the federal entity with the report information about federal oil, gas resources for the general purpose of the federal financial reporting and consolidated financial report of the U.S. government and in the conformance with the standard SFFAS 34 hierarchy generally accepted accounting principle, including application of the standards issued by the Federal Accounting Safety Board. A statement articulates general principle but should guide with the preparer of the general purpose of federal financial reports accounting with the federal oil and gas resource of the time. Federal lands contain a variety of the natural resources other than oil and gas. Prove the reserves that they are not specifically stressed by the statement. If the statement does not recover the preclude with the entity of the reporting information over the type of the federally owned natural resources. However, this statement should be considered in conjunction with the SFFAS 7 accounting for revenue or other financial sources when applying SFFA 34 to other federal owned natural resources definition. Definitions in paragraph 11 and 12 present with the first of the accounting standard because they are new technical terms not previously defined in the federal accounting standards. Federal oil, gas resource. The oil, gas resource over with the federal government may exercise the sovereign right to respect with the exploration, exploitation, and from which federal government has the authority to derive revenues for its use. Federal and oil, gas resources do not include resources over which the federal government acts on the fiduciary for the benefit of the non-federal party. 12. Royalty estimated petroleum royalties. Regional estimated petroleum royalties. Regional estimated petroleum royalties mean the estimated end of the period value for the federal government royalties shared on proved oil and gas reserves from federal oil and gas resources in each region. Accounting reporting federal oil and gas resource component entity. The schedule estimated of the federal oil and gas petroleum royalties. Extensive federal oil and gas resources exist on the public land throughout the country for the other continental shelves and on other outer continental shelves. These resources will provide economic benefit to the federal government through the revenue from leasing activities, collection of the royalties of the production. Federal government controls access to these resources. The federal oil and gas resources are made up of the two primary components: reserve and undiscovered resource. The reserve can be either further defined, either proved or unproved. This undiscovered resource that can be further defined as recoverable, non-recoverable. See Figure 1 component of the federal oil gas resource, the basis for the conclusion for the illustration of the universe of federal oil gas resource of the breakdown its components. 15. Value of federal government's estimated petroleum royalties from the production of federal oil gas proved reserves should be reported in a schedule estimated federal oil gas petroleum royalties by component entity responsible for collecting royalties. Schedule that should be presented with the required supplemental information as part of the discussion of all significant federal oil gas resources under the management by entity. 16. The board believed the detailed estimation methodology valuing federal oil gas resources should be developed by the federal entities and with the environmental heavily affected with the change of the price of the technology advancement, economic operation condition, known the geological engineering, economic data estimation methodologies may need to regularly update to reflect these changing conditions. The estimate of the developed should approximate to the percent value for the future federal royalty receipts on proved reserves known to exist as of the reporting date. The estimate should be based on the best information available at the fiscal year end or close to the fiscal year end as possible. 18. Discount rates of the date reporting date present value of measurement of the federal oil gas resource should be based on the interest rate of the marketable treasury securities of the maturity consistent with the cash flowing being discounted. 19. The entity's estimate should reflect the judgment about the outcome of the events based on the experience of the expectation about the future, and estimates should reflect whether reasonable with the assume the under circumstances whether the entity with the own assumption for the future cash flows for the maybe the entity should review the assumption of the general federal government of the evidence of the such by a source independent with the reporting entity, for example, those used for the Bureau of Economic Analysis for the National Income Product accounts. If the entity owns assumptions that do not reflect the data that are consistent with the short for the independent of the reporting entity, with an explanation of which entity's own assumptions are preferred should be provided. 20. The value of federal government estimated petroleum royalties should be computed based on the calculation of federal oil gas proved reserves on a regional basis for the purpose of the same of the regions used for the determining reporting regional amount of the factors should be collaborative developed by all component entities that include all federal oil gas resource activity region using the calculating regional estimated petroleum royalties applying with the exchange should be consistent with the aligned with the regions, usually internally by the component entity of the administrating federal oil gas resource activities. 21. The estimate of the future federal royalties received with the proof of the reserve known to exist at the reporting date should be divided for the commodity type of the wet gas, dry gas, or oil, lease condensate, onshore, offshore, etc. calculated separately with the material differences would otherwise result, but each of the individual calculations should be reported separately and summed together to arrive at the federal government's total estimated petroleum royalties. 22. Preferred measurement of method of valuing when the federal government's estimated petroleum royalties present value of the federal or future federal royalty received with the proof of the reserve using risk-free discount rate with the described paragraph 17. However, alternate method of measuring fair value with the current price may be acceptable if not reasonable possible to estimate the present value of the future federal royalty receipts on proved reserves using the methodology described in paragraph 17 through 19. 23. Once established, the estimation methodology should be consistently filed with explaining with the financial report that the environmental or other changes would provide with the development of an improved methodology with the nature of the region for the change of the methodology as well as the effect of the changes should be explained. Schedule estimated federal oil, gas, petroleum royalties to be distributed with the others. The majority of the federal government estimated petroleum royalties from the production of federal oil, gas, proved with reserve of the distributed to the state governments, other federal agency with the general fund of the U.S. Treasury in accordance with the legislation allocation formulas. Legislated allocation formulas constitute the percent obligation of the component entity reasonable collection royalty to provide the assistance to another entity and the underlying legislation to identify the condition under which these distributions will be made. 25. Of the value estimated federal oil, gas, petroleum royalty revenue designated with the others should be reported with the schedule estimate of the petroleum royalty to be distributed to the others for the component entity that is responsible for collecting royalties. The schedule should be represented with the required statement. The required supplementary information type of the entity may be discussion of significant federal oil, gas resources under the management by the entity. 26. The value of the revenue to be distributed to the others shall be estimated based on the portion of the royalty share of the federal approved oil, gas reserve of the distributed with the designated to be distributed to the other. For example, the average annual share of the revenue with the distributed to the others over preceding 12 months may be the acceptable base for the estimating petroleum royalties to be distributed. Other methodology may also be acceptable. Annual valuation estimated petroleum royalties to be distributed to the others. 27. The estimated petroleum royalties asset value of the petroleum royalties to be distributed to the others should be valued at the end of each fiscal year. Component entity reporting requirement. The component entity responsible for collecting royalties should provide for the following narrative of the schedule with the representative the required statement, supplementary information, concise statement explaining how the management of federal oil and the gas resource are important with the overall mission of the entity, with a brief description of the entity, with the stewardship policy of the federal oil gas resource, for the stewardship policy of the federal oil gas resources should be described with the guiding principles established to assess oil gas resource of the other of the reach of the interest of the developer and shall assign lease of the when bidders administrative of the leases, collecting bonuses, rents, royalty in kind. Distribute the collection consent with a statutory requirement, prohibition, limitation, government entity, a narrative, the description fee for the royalty with rights to identify with the scale, if applicable, the narrative should provide fee with the right to identify the future scale of the location of the field involved with the future scale of the best estimate of the when the rights would be sold with the calculated value report with the future royalty rights identified with the scale should be based on a specified field with the be sold with consistent with valuation requirements in paragraph 22. The narrative describing and displaying showing revenue report with the category reporting period should be presented with the offshore with the onshore revenue showing following categories: royalty revenue, oil, gas, rent revenue, bonus, bid revenue for leases, and total revenue from all above categories. The narrative of the describing and displaying showing the quantity of oil, gas, proved reserve at the end of the reporting period, the average regional, average first purchase price for the oil, and average of the regional, average wellhead price for the gas reporting period, and 3. The average roll rate for the oil and gas reporting period. F. Narrative description, estimated methodology to calculate the value of the federal government's estimated petroleum royalties, and a minimum of the narrative. The explanation should include a plain English explanation, measurement method, the present value of the assumption incorporated into the estimate with the discount rate of the calculated present value of the production decline curve of the portion, approved reserves under federal lands, future oil, gas price, the inflation rates, etc., and any significant change of the estimated methodology, including underlying assumptions from prior year as required in paragraph 20 for the nature of region, any of the changes as well with the effect the changes should be explained. G. With the reference for the source of the reports used to calculate the value of the federal government's estimated petroleum royalties, near the describing the displaying showing the sales value of the royalty revenue, the estimated value of the royalty relief produced federal oil gas research of the reporting period with the extent of the regional information available to contribute to the understanding of the information for each of the regions should be provided. The narrative describing the other significant federal oil gas reef under management by any but not addressed with the statement to be covered not currently under lease coastal plain with the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. The narrative should be sufficient to enable the financial statement of the reader to gain and understand the full extent of the federal oil gas resources under management by any. Consolidated financial report with the United States government reporting requirement. The government-wide entity should provide with the following information related to the federal oil gas reach of the required supplemental information as part of the discussion of all significant federal oil gas reach for the under the management of federal government. A concise statement explaining the nature and valuation of the federal oil gas reach over the nature of it, describing the displaying showing the quantity of the oil gas proved the reserves at the end of the reporting period. 2. The average regional average first purchase price for the average of the regional average worst wellhead price for the gas for the reporting period, for the average royalty, with the rate of the oil gas reporting period, for the size for the oil value of the oil gas commodity type identified for using calculating the federal government total estimated petroleum royalties for the reporting period. See paragraph 21. 5. The value estimated petroleum royalties end of the reporting period, and C. Reference to specific agency report for the additional information about federal oil gas resource for the effective date, the same with the effect for the required supplementary information for the periods beginning after September 30th, 2011. Earlier implementation is encouraged. 31 is report intent information required for the statement of the transaction, basic information after being reported, the required supplemental information period of 3 years prior to conclusion of the 3-year required supplemental information period. The board plans to make the determination as to whether the information transition, basic information, financial statement, recognition, note, disclosure of the statement will remain in effect until such determination is made. The provisions of the statement need not to be applied to new and material items. Appendix A, basis for conclusion. Alright. What was that last one? Appendix B, illustrations. And if you want to read the appendixes, you can. It's the Statement of Federal Accounting Standards 38, Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board accounting federal oil and gas resources.